about coding and especially about our new product, Kupp Code Analytics, which is basically a tool to ensure you're following best practices and also, of course, identify root causes. We will take a look at the details later. But it's not just about Power Platform development, also Azure. So we'll see different use cases how we can improve our code quality. And of course, a few common areas where we see different things. Regarding the agenda, a few things are a little bit different today. I had a small accident yesterday. This why the setup is a little bit different today, but hopefully we will not have any errors or any technical problems. And yeah, one more thing, of course, we will have enough time for Q&A at the end of the session. So please just write down your questions and we try to answer them after the content. Okay, let's take a look at the agenda for today. I would like to start with a quick introduction and what problems we are basically looking for, some scenarios, but also a few common root causes, why code quality can be very bad sometimes. So we'll take a look at some issues and how to apply best practices. And the second part is our new solution, Code Analytics, as I already said. I would like to give you some background information, how it works behind the scenes, because a lot of people ask us different questions. We launched it last week, but before that, there was a very long period of research, and we still do that. But now this is the first real-world use case where we can use the technology. So I would like to show you a few examples, but also I would like to talk about the difference between early and late bound and why we do that. And of course, as I already said, a few real-world demos, because in most cases, when you say, okay, you develop code for Dynamics, you say, okay, it's not necessary anymore because you have different low-code platforms and so on. That's fine, but in many use cases, you need to implement something more complex. So this is why we say, okay, we still need the code. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure we'll always have the need for some coding things. Yeah, of course, you can implement the same logic in some different way, but the efforts are much higher. And this is why I say, okay, we should still have some high qualities on our code base. Okay, then let's start. A few things about myself, as most of you already know. I'm Robert. I'm a technical architect here, and yeah, I've been working in many different projects around the world, so I do have a lot of experience in the industry. But of course, my focus is development in DevOps, in Dynamics, but also a lot of things like infrastructure topics, identification, so everything in the Microsoft stack. And yeah, I'm one of the developers of our products, of course, so the deployment manager and also Code Analytics. So today we would like to focus on Code Analytics, so how we can improve the code quality, not about deployments. Before we start, I would like to give you a few things as a reminder. I mean, most of you already know, but let's take a look at the example here. When you try to learn something about Dynamics development, what you do in most cases, you would just go and read some tutorials or things like that. In most cases, you will see something like this one, the account plugin. So this is a very classic run. But I say for learning purposes, it's fine. But if you would like to deliver something to the customer, you should not do that. It's very simple because it's a duplicated code. I mean, it's a very straightforward example, and you do all of the checks here. So, and by the way, today I don't want to talk about how to write plugins. I mean, there are a lot of other people they can do that, and you find a lot of necessary, a lot of information on the internet. I would like to focus on the professional side, so how we can improve that. And yeah, I say you should not do that. I mean, at the end, of course, you need it. You need the context, you need the tracing service and things like that, but should not have the same code in every plugin. I mean, this is a very basic principle of development. We do not copy code. We just define a base class and that's it. But of course, you should not save the organization service in a variable because it will be used for multiple threads at the same time. So we know all of this stuff. So if you don't know it, just read it on the internet. But what I'm saying is, don't do that. Just copy the code and identify or develop some logic to reuse the code in the proper way, of course. So let's take a look at the most common root causes here. Of course, we have duplicated code. It's quite hard to analyze, and I've seen it so many times. When I go to a project, it's escalating, nothing works. Many times I see things like that. So a lot of code, unnecessary code, because those lines, why? There's really no reason for that. We just need it once, and that's it. And maybe we can split the classes for opportunities, counts for any entities, yeah, but we should not have 100 lines of if statements just to check for the logical name of the entity. That's pretty useless in my opinion. So, well, it's duplicated code. We can make a lot of mistakes in entity names. And yes, I will talk about late bound and early bound entities later. And yeah, we can have a lot of typos, which basically will causes some KeyNotFoundExceptions and things like that. And those are pretty hard to analyze if you just have the stack trace and no proper analyzing files. So you don't know the line number, you have to search and try to identify it. So it's pretty stupid. And of course, magic numbers. So I've seen so many times that people just use the numbers instead of codes like, okay, you have a static class and then you find it. So you should not use magic numbers. Yeah, that's a very bad thing. Yeah. And many scripts in the same form. Well, a basic principle of dynamics, I think we have so many possibilities, but that doesn't mean we should use it. So we should not put a JavaScript file on every single control because the maintenance efforts are way too high. And as I said, again, it's very difficult to identify the triggers. So what we do is, I will explain that later. We have just one file, we have one initial function, and then just route the different calls through the code. I mean, there are different ways to do that, but at the end, you should know what you're doing and you should have a concept at least. The reason why I'm saying this is because I've seen it so many times that you have so many files and actually nobody knows what's going on because everybody has a different way to implement that. So try to have an aligned concept on that. And yeah, another very common thing is loops. I'm talking about plugin circles, and as you know, we got the pre-stage, we got the main stage and the post stage. I don't care about the pre-validation, but pre and post, yeah, I think it's a very basic rule that you should not modify the target in the post stage, because then you have to trigger an update again, and that basically means you're running in circles. So you have a lot of risk to basically implement an infinity loop. And this is why I would say, hey, go to the pre-stage, do your stuff on the target, and do not trigger an unnecessary update. I think that's pretty clear, but I've seen that so many times. And if you don't have an infinity loop, it's getting even worse. You have a very bad performance because at the end of the 100th run or something like this, somebody's checking for some changes and then it will just return. Yeah, but you already wasted a lot of time with 100 runs. So just try to avoid those things. Okay. And I thought about this topic a couple of hours, actually, if I should show you that or not, because many people ask us how we do that and why we don't agree with a lot of public statements like, okay, this is the plugin, this is how it should look like and things like that. Well, this is what we do internally. So on the next slides, I would like to give you a quick introduction how we work internally. And of course, we also use early bound entities. So we have, of course, the basic SDK together with some custom plugins to generate option sets and things like that. We have a common plugin base, and what we also do is we have attributes to route the calls. So we don't check for entity names or messages like create or update, delete, because it's the same thing again and again. And it's very simple to implement a generic logic to make it very easy to implement that. And the next topic is JavaScript or TypeScript. And we also, of course, use generated code. And we are using T4 templates for that, for those of you who don't know. T4 is an integrated feature in Visual Studio to basically generate code based on C#. So you write some C# script and you can have output like JavaScript or something else. Yeah. So you just need to connect to the metadata service, retrieve the data, and then you generate the code. Yeah. And of course, you can use some extension for that as well. So at the end, if you're happy with the situation, that's fine. And of course, we have CI/CD pipelines, but I think this is nothing new. We update web resources directly from the repository and also plugins and do some deployment things as well. Okay. And let me start over here. Again, the reason why I explained this here is because so many people ask us, hey, why do I do that? Yeah, it works. We have early bound entities, so we don't need the tool. Yes, that's right. Early bound entities is the preferred way to implement things. But there are many cases when you go to a project, yeah, and it is what it is, you have to handle the situation. That's one case. Another case is small things like Azure Functions, where you just have a few lines of code and you don't want to have any overhead. And a few more other cases, yeah. And this is why we said, okay, this is a useful situation. But there's, as I already explained, technology behind the whole thing is not just IntelliSense. There's much more than that. We will see that later. But again, okay, here's an example for a very bad practice thing. And this is what we do, yeah. And if we take a look at, let me just switch to my pen here. I hope I can do that. Yes, we can see it here. So we have the CM step. This is just an attribute and custom attribute. And we got a plugin base. And the plugin base, of course, you need to implement the execute method, but then you can just redirect the call to the specific method. The only thing you need to do is some kind of reflection, and that's it. So it's a very basic C# implementation, and then you can very easily define the routing. So account, this is by the way, and then just generated code, of course, relevant entity, messages, and so on. So that's easy, straightforward. You just have to implement it once, and that's it. And again, there are many ways to do that, but you just have to do that. Yeah, you should not repeat the code again and again, and always retrieve the organization service. Yeah, there are many reasons for that, but yeah, effort and useless wasting of time is, I think, that's the primary one. And one more thing is, yeah, the context. So of course, we collect some information about the current execution context, but this is just a summary of the existing data. And we got our logic. This is what we do. We basically split the plugin execution routing and the business logic. It's a very cool thing because, of course, we can reuse our logic. And by the way, our logic is always stateful. So the plugin must be stateless, of course, but the logic can be stateful. So we can reference cluster instance-based variables. And I think this is something much cooler and easier to test, of course. So as you can see here, we just hand over the target and okay, it's a little bit harder for me when I don't have my, okay, here we go. Yes, and this is our plugin logic. So we just do some business logic things here, but the important part is we don't have any unnecessary overhead here. We don't need any logger or tracing servers or whatever because it's already in the plugin base. So in this case, we can very focus on our logic here. And this is what I always say, hey, don't have too much parameters. I mean, I've seen it so many times that people have plugins or methods with 15 arguments, and the first 8 of them are just global errors like organization service, logger, and things like that. So you can skip the first 8 and just focus on the important stuff. Yeah, I think this is way more efficient than just hand over variables all the day. Okay. And the next thing is JavaScript. And again, I love to generate code, yeah, because it's way more efficient than just type entity names, yeah. And again, there are also a lot of extensions to do that. We are using our internal structure here, but at the end, it's the same thing. So we have our templates, and in this case, we don't generate any C# code, we generate JavaScript code. So just retrieve the data and then generate the code. I think this is pretty straightforward here. And this is how it looks like. And of course, we got our values, our option set values, and so on, and our attributes. And this is an older screenshot, but of course, we have the same thing for TypeScript. So I think it's the same thing here. And this is how we use it. And one more thing here, it's important to reference, of course, the other files to give Visual Studio a hint how the data should be should be handled here. And another thing is, I already mentioned that in the beginning, we have a load method. So of course, the whole thing is self-executing. You cannot see it here, but at the end, it will be executed automatically. But what we do is we load it, and then we can decide if we would like to, if you're in the context of create or update, and we just decide and then execute the method. I think this is much easier than have a lot of different functions and always go to the customizations and trigger the functionality. And I think it's also easier to maintain. So this is basically just my opinion, but yeah, feel free to share your comments here. And a very quick look at our deployments here. Well, coding and dynamics, of course, there are different things, yeah, but please never go to the system directly and update web resources. It's pretty messy. Nobody knows what's going on in the system. And when you deploy something to production, it's even worse because you have a lot of damage and you have to do some data cleanup afterwards, whatever. So try to keep your source in the source control. I mean, it's a very basic rule. I still don't understand why people don't do that. Sometimes they don't have enough time, whatever, but at the end, they always waste a lot of time to fix it later. So it's much better if you just go to the source control and find a well-defined way to update your resources. In our case, of course, we are using our internal tools as well. So we update the assemblies. What we do is we also have a few internal checks. So we check for plugin implementations or custom code activities and things like that, and load the whole thing into a different app domain for security purposes. So we have our app domain, we analyze the plugin, see if everything works, and then we just push it to Dynamics automatically in DevOps. And we basically do the same for web resources. Okay. And our next part here is basically the introduction of our new technology. And well, the whole thing is a product called Code Analytics, which is actually a Visual Studio extension. So you can use it directly from your coding environment. And it's basically just using a subset of our current technology, but I still think it's very helpful for many use cases. So I would like to give you a quick introduction how it works, the basics, and a very important thing, I would like to give you an outlook what we are going to do in the next month, because there are a lot of things going on in the background, a lot of research, especially focused on development for Azure and best practices and so on. So what we have done is, based on the experience from the past in different projects, we developed technology to cover all of those common mistakes and basically give you a platform and say, okay, this is my system, do your analytics there, and let me know what's wrong with my system. This is basically our goal. But yeah, let's take a look at the very basic use cases first. And well, the reason why I would like to show you that today is also a few people ask us, hey, this looks interesting, but we are using generated code. We don't need that. That's not a big benefit for us. Well, I agree with that. You don't have many benefits if you're using about entities right now. But this is just the very beginning. So we'll see that on the next slide, but that's just with a very simple use case. Okay, simple IntelliSense. We will see the implementation on the next slide, or actually how it works. But this is a basic overview. So of course we have connectors, in this case just Dataverse, but we do the same thing with logic apps and so on, so many different sources. But in this case, we just retrieve the metadata and include it in your current coding session. So we provide IntelliSense, we provide some information to the error list and so on. And in this case, okay, let's talk about entity names. I think this is a very straightforward thing, but at the end, it's still a unthankful task, because you have to take a look at the system, you have to identify the right names and so on. I mean, it's pretty simple for account and so on, but for custom entities, it's a little bit harder, especially for fields. In most cases, you have typos, so you have to go to the customizations, open the solutions, and check for the file names. Again, if you don't have generated code here. And then a little bit more interesting things are plugin images, because so far I've never seen a solution generating code for plugin images. I mean, in most cases they're just called pre-image, post-image, but we do that as well. So we don't generate the code in the background. We do that on the fly. We analyze the code, see the current cursor position, and then see, okay, what is the current context? So what is needed right now? And if we're in a context where we need the name of plugin images, we will provide that information immediately. So you don't have to take a look at the registers plugin. So you open up plugin registration tool, you take a look at the step and so on. You don't have to do that because you have it directly in your IntelliSense session. And the same thing works, of course, for relations. And this is how it works in a very simple use case. So this is a very simple example. In this case, you got a query expression. You have to enter the entity name. On the second line, you will get a context-specific list of suggestions. In this case, called attribute names that scope to account, because there's no other meaningful way to write attribute names here. So But this is, I think, the very basic but important thing to understand. We analyze the code. We don't just provide some random suggestions here based on your system. We really do deep analysis in the current context. And this is what it makes it, of course, more difficult, but also way more efficient than just provide everything here. Yeah. And well, this is another thing many people ask me in the past, how we do that. I mean, the whole thing is way more complicated, but if you break it down to a very simple thing, like conditions, if you would like to know, okay, what's the result of the conditions, true or false, there's a very simple answer, you don't know. So what you can do is you can make some assumptions based on the information you have. So let's take a look at the left side, the runtime. Of course, during the runtime, if you have a simple if statement and I assign the variable of type entity to an account or to a contact, I don't know. During the runtime, I know it, yeah, it's an account, okay, and then if I try to access the attribute birthday, it will fail because it doesn't exist. So I think this is a very simple thing. On the right side, during the static code analysis phase, what you can do is you can say, okay, it can be both, of course, but then you have to take a look at the system and say, okay, I got attributes, I got first name, last name, birthday. Okay, but the only common attribute is owner ID. So I have to filter the others and just provide owner ID. So what I'm trying to say here is, if you don't know, you can just assume both cases. Yeah. But of course, if you do that, you will have so many cases that you will get sets with an infinity number of entries. So it's useless at the end. So this is why we have improved and improved over a couple of months. And now we have a very stable system to analyze the conditions based on different other information sources. So at the end, we can provide a meaningful way to say, okay, this can be the output of this condition. Yeah. It's still in progress, so it's still a POC concept, but it works quite well so far. Okay, and the reason why I explained it on the previous slides, this is what I would like to focus a little bit right now. I said, okay, I would want to talk about different ways to improve the code and what we do right now and what we do in the future. On the left side, we have the current situation. So our solution, our product is basically focused or scoped to IntelliSense and of course some error analysis and things like that and some comments. But basically we also, of course, detect types and naming errors and so on. But the main reason why we should, we say, okay, use the solution is helpful for you is, as I said, for projects without generated code, so without early bound entities, but also for small things like Azure Functions or console apps, yeah, to fix some code. We will see it in the examples later. We don't need to generate some code or do some maintenance or whatever. We just want to have a very quick fix within a few minutes, and this is a perfect solution for that. But also some POCs. So, again, I do recommend that you should use generated code, but in those cases, it's more efficient that if you don't have to generate the code, especially if you don't have experience with that. Okay, that's the current situation. But our main goal for the future, we are currently working on different implementations for best practice checks. So we have the technology. On the left side, we have the product, but the technology behind is way bigger. So we can do best practice analysis for basically any code related to Dynamics or any kind of web API. We're going to support different APIs like database and so on in the future, but right now we do HTTP APIs and also Dynamics APIs. And that means it doesn't matter if you have a console app, if you have a logic function, Azure function, a logic app, Power Automate flows, so many different things. Yeah, of course, business rules, console apps, so many different things. At the end, we just say, okay, this is your source code repository, this is your Azure tenant. We're gonna analyze everything, and then we can show you, okay, what's wrong with that. I know that sounds like, okay, it's more or less impossible, but our results right now are pretty great, and we're going to publish a few results within the next month. So I'm really looking forward to that. So this is a quick outlook, what we're going to do in the future, and yeah, how the technology behind works. And you might already know it. this is an example from last year. So what we do in the background is we analyze the code, and we can do things like this. On the right side, you can see it's highlighted in red. We got our target, we got the update. Again, this is a simple use case, but we're able to extract that information. And based on that, we can generate reports, we can generate visualizations where you can see the data flows without executing the actual code. And I think this is a very powerful feature. And if I relate that back to the generated code versus late-bound entities, this is what we do, and it doesn't matter if you have generated code or not, because at the end, the update is the same. Yeah? And this is why we say, okay, the technology is great. There's a lot of high potential for benefits in every project. Doesn't matter if it's generated code or not, because we analyze every kind of projects, as I said, including XML-based or JSON-based like logic apps. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, this is another example, but I don't want to focus or waste too much time today on this. Yeah, it's basically a visualization of data flows where you can easily identify, okay, what's going on in the system. And again, you don't need to execute the code, because you can see it directly and you can identify, okay, what are the side effects of my change right now? Okay, then let's take a look at our first example here. And people ask me always, okay, hey, do you have any real world cases? Yeah, because of course we published some videos with basic use cases to understand how it works. But what about the real world cases? Let's start with a plugin. By the way, we got 3 of them. So let's start with a plugin. It's a pre-create plugin, pre-create, because we would like to change the owner of every entity. And by the way, this is a basic implementation, but I think you can understand the idea here. So it's a one-time operation, create only. And of course, we don't need to trigger an update because we are in pre-operation, of course. And it's registered to multiple entities. So for example, we would like to change the owner of accounts, contacts, and every other single item where we already registered the plugin. So what we need to do is we need to implement the plugin. I think this is the straightforward way to do that. And yeah, you don't need code for that. You can do it another way as well, but not if you would like to do something more fancy. In this case, we would like to retrieve the territory of the current user, so the user who has created the current entity or record, sorry. And yeah, and then we retrieve the manager of the territory. And yes, you can do the same thing, but if you need a little bit more custom logic, you have to use some kind of plugin. And yeah, what I would like to show you now is, because this is what people usually do, they retrieve those things and so on, so it's fine. But it takes too much time, at least in my opinion. So I have the example here, and yes, I think it's pretty straightforward, but let's do something. Let's try to rewrite the statement. And this is the first thing I would like to show you here is it's the same thing again and again. So right now, when I trigger retrieve or call retrieve, I need an entity name and just write it down. Okay, cool. Then the ID in this case was the entity. And now it's a good question. Okay, how do I know what it is? It can be a user, it can be something else. But if I have a generic logic, I need common entities. Yeah, in this case, it's registered to different entities, so it should be common attributes. But in this case, it is interpreted as user. This can be improved, of course, but let's go on. At least I got my created by. Sorry. Yeah, at least I got my suggestion here, so I know created by is fine. And the next thing, as always, column set. Okay, so okay, I made a mistake here. See it. There was something wrong. I think I forgot to unregister the plugins here. This is why it's not working. Let's say it again. Okay, so I messed it up in the background, but the main idea was I can see that it is basically retrieving a system user, and based on that, I can get my suggestions here. Yeah? But this only works if you have a generic plugin and if you registered it to multiple entities. So it's not possible to identify it to one unique entity. Then you will get the common attributes like created on, owner ID, and so on. But in this case, it's registered to just one entity in the back, to one plugin in the background. So we have to just use this one. And the second one is again the same thing. I got my territory here, got my user here. And in this case, it can be multiple entities, so it's not 100% clear. But I still know, okay, I would like to use this one. And I also need my manager ID. And of course, I will get the type here and so on. But the most important point is, of course, the logical name and sometimes the display name, because it can be a little bit confusing if you don't know it. So at the end, I will get my correct attribute name. And what I can do now is say it's an entity and this is my owner, because yeah, it's not clear as I already said. So I got the common attributes here. And the same thing, manager, because it knows, okay, actually the software knows this is the territory, so the entity must be territory, and I can filter it down to attribute names related to the territory. That's it. I mean, this is a very simple use case, and again, you can do the same thing with no-code things, but if you have some more complex requirements, you need code at the end, and especially for those ownership logic implementations, I highly recommend to use code because it's just more flexible and don't have this massive, complicated logic apps or flows or whatever to do that. So I think it's more efficient and easier to maintain if you do it in code. Okay, then let's switch back to our slides here. And our next thing is the Azure Function. And actually, I really love it. Azure Functions are a very easy and straightforward way to implement integrations between different systems. But one of the main problems, actually based in my opinion, is that people start to write code and they have 500 lines of code and just 10 of them are useful and the rest is just unnecessary organizational things, yeah, like logging, like deserialized JSON and things like that. So a lot of useless code, and it's very hard to identify the useful things. So what I'm saying is it should be simple and it should be efficient, of course, and no useless helper function. We don't need that, okay? Because we have a lot of stuff out of the box and I think it's worth it to use it. So let's take a quick look at our example here. And I think it's easier if we do that directly in code. My function here. And by the way, there's nothing special here, so the configuration is pretty easy. I just need to connect to my system, and that's more or less it. And then I just refresh the cache. It takes 2 minutes, and that's it. I don't have to connect. Yeah, in this case, it's a very simple Azure function. So I think it's more or less out of the box from the template. But one important thing is I changed it to message. So instead of just a plain string, I'm using a message instead. And this is also out of the box. So I think it's located, not sure. Let me check that. Yeah, Azure Service Bus. Okay, so you can basically just install the package and you will get it. And in this way, it's much easier because all I have to do is I get my body, and from the body, of course, I can convert it into a string and then get the remote execution context, which is basically inherited class from the normal execution context. So I get all of the related execution, context information like business unit, owner, and so on. And that's very easy. So please do not try to deserialize it as a common object and then use some kind of string-based access operations to get the values. I think it's much easier that way. Okay. And yeah, of course, it only works if you're using JSON. The messages in your queue, you can set it to XML or binary, but I think we have very tiny messages, so we can go for JSON. And of course, if needed, I can retrieve the whole thing. So what I would like to do again is I would like to create a new task for every created account. And this queue is only connected to accounts. So there's just one trigger in my system, and it will basically create a new message in the service bus when an account has been created. So what I do is, again, retrieve my account. That's it. And I got my own ID here because I know it's an account because obviously I'm retrieving it. And also, I need to retrieve the name, okay? So what I can do is just add it, yeah. And yes, you can set it to true. Column to true, that means you will retrieve all attributes, but this is a very bad performance implication sometimes. So if you want to go fast, please specify the names or the attributes you really need. Okay, so I got it. And then I create a new entity. It's the same thing over and over again. And what I do is, when I'm here, I can basically assign the name. So I know this is some kind of artificial use case here, but I think you can understand the idea. And when I count them, okay, I'm on 27 now from 17, so I got 10 lines. 10 lines in code to get the information, retrieve data, and create a new entity in Dynamics in 10 lines. Nothing more is needed, okay? And yes, you can do some checks, you can do null pointer checks and so on, so then you maybe have a few lines more than that, but you have almost zero unnecessary overhead. And this is what I'm trying to explain here. Of course, our product extension is pretty cool and it's a helpful thing here because you're much faster and you don't have to browse the data model and so on. But another important thing is I got 10 lines, okay? So this is, I think, way better than have a lot of serializing and unserializing things, and you know what I mean. So, okay. Then let's move on with our next example here. Okay, and this is a very, very cool one. Let me start to explain the use case. We do not need the code later on. We would like to have a quick fix. Imagine you have some data problems on your environment. So what you usually do is you identify that, so you define the filter, then you try the whole thing on your test system, and then you apply the change in production. So in most cases, you need some kind of code. I've never seen that somebody is fixing a lot of data with a logic app. I mean, if the use case is simple enough, okay. But let's assume we have a complex use case. So what we need to do is we need a quick fix, so we don't have enough time. We need a temporary solution, so we don't have to have a high quality on that. And we have a defined fetch XML filter. And based on that, we would like to implement it. Okay, so let's take a look at the filter here. So in this case, it's accounts. So we're looking for accounts, and we would like to have all accounts where the primary contact doesn't want to have email. So the flag do not email allow is sent. Okay, in this case, it's allowed. Sorry for that. This was my bad. But okay, it's the same thing. So if allow or not, this is our filter. So what we can do is we can open a new console app at the dependencies, connect to the system and fix that. So, okay, let's do that and try to be fast, okay? I got my console app here. I got my dependencies, so just 2 of them. First of all, let's think about it. What I need to do is I need service client. So I don't need a connection here. This can be done later. Next is I need to retrieve something. Okay. Okay. Now I need my fetch XML. Let me open that. Okay. Okay, cool. So let's download that. Okay, now I get this one, and I got a lot of double quotes here. Yeah, not cool. Okay, so you know what I need to do. I need to convert it and so on into some stuff that it works. But let me do another thing. So I basically convert it into a query expression. Okay, cool. And now I basically can use it. Cool. And as you can see, I see its accounts. And the entity name is accounts. So what I've done is basically, of course, I converted the query expression, or the fetch XML into a query expression, because it's based on code. It's easier to change, so I don't have to convert it and so on. I don't have to, handle all of those string-based things here. And if I would like to add something new, I can do that, and of course I can do the formatting here. But the important point is, I got the entity name, and also can use related entities and so on, of course, but I also have it here. So the current item will be retrieved back to its origins. In this case, okay, via the query expression, it will be solved. So based on that, it will get an account and we'll see, okay, it works. And of course, it can be a more complex query as well. But at the end, I'm very, very fast. It now can work with an entity. Okay, so this is another feature we have implemented just to improve the performance, how we do things. Okay, then I'm done with my main content here. We are already got 42 minutes here. So now I would like to go back to my slides here. Okay, and as you have seen, the tool basically is not 100% complete. It's just using a subset of our technology, and this is what we are going to improve in the future. But also with the subset, it's pretty helpful and a big improvement regarding performance and code quality. So another thing is regarding our current product, if you would like, there's a limited offer today regarding the webinar to extend the test trial. So you can basically just download it directly and give it a test. So if you like it, you can extend the trial. My colleague will post the link right now in the chat window, but of course also you can find it directly on Kupp Code Analytics. So I'm really looking forward to some kind of feedback. If you like it, if you have any questions about it, just feel free to share your opinion here. And yeah, I think regarding the comments, if you can leave a comment or a rating, we will extend your free license for 6 months, so you have enough time to try and play around and so on. But yeah, as I already said, yeah, a lot of great features will come in the next few weeks and months. So we will really working hard on that to improve the product and provide a better coding experience here. Okay, and now we are almost at the end, and we have a few questions. So feel free to share your questions. And I think I have to take a look at the window here. There's a Q&A section. And to be honest, I don't know how it works exactly, but let me quickly check that. Okay, cool. We got a few questions here. Okay, and let me just take a look at the questions. Okay. Okay, I see there were some resolution issues. I'm sorry for that. I didn't know that. As I said, my setup today is a little bit different because of my accident. So I'm really sorry for that. And okay, I just need a few seconds to go through the questions. Okay, regarding the download, of course, you can download it directly either from our website or from Marketplace. But one important thing, currently we support Visual Studio 2022, but also 2019. But 2019 must be downloaded directly from our website because there are some technical issues there, but we do support both. Yeah. One more thing is right now there are some compatibility issues with other extensions like 𝗤𝗍, but we're working on that. But we already published an article how to fix that as a workaround. Yeah, but you can download it directly. So, okay. Yeah, okay, there was a question about query expressions and Azure Functions. Yes, we do support that. So basically, we do support every context. We just check if they have a reference to the TRM SDK, and then the extension will try to provide IntelliSense there. So it doesn't matter which context. Okay. Yeah, condition results. Yeah, as I already said, it's a complex thing. We're still improving that part. But yeah, for simple use cases, you have to assume both. So if there's a dynamic condition, you don't know, you have to assume both. But it will depend on the logic, yeah. So in most cases, when you assign different entity name based on a condition at the end, you cannot have both, yeah. So if you take into account the real world execution behavior, you will see that at the end you have to reduce to the common attributes. So I hope this answers your question more or less. Okay. Well, data privacy, yeah, that's a good point. We do not share any data with our servers. So the only thing we do is we check for updates at the start. And if you would like, you can send us a crash report by email, but there's always a confirmation by the user needed to do that. So we don't exchange any data. And if you need to access to your production system, actually that's not needed because the code is the same. Huh? So it's totally fine if you connect to your development system. And yeah, we do support multiple environments. Well, generic types. So if you have, I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but if you have generic types, you can also have restrictions. Currently, we do not support that. It works, of course, but we will not consider the generic type restrictions on the suggestion list. Okay, a few more things. I'm not sure if I'm able to answer all of those questions in this session because there are a lot of questions here in the pipeline. So I will try to answer them later. If you're not anonymous, I will send you an email to talk about the question. Okay. Just a second. Okay, that's a longer question. Well, to answer the first part, yeah, metadata will be cached, of course, otherwise it would be much slower than we do it. So, of course, IntelliSense, we're talking about milliseconds, so we have to cache that, yeah. But we don't cache the whole system, we just cache the necessary data, metadata, of course, locally to provide a better, faster experience here. And yeah, your team does, sorry, let me try to explain it another way. No, there's no dependency. So you don't need the extension. If you're a member of a team and someone is working with the extension, the others not, that's fine, yeah. So there's no dependency. Of course, you don't have the benefits then, but basically there's no dependency to the solution. And no, you don't need it on your build server as well. And yes, basically it's a commercial product, that's right, but we do provide trial licenses, of course, but also for small projects, or if you my blog and just would like to show something, you can use it for free. So as long as you don't have a commercial project, you can use it for free, of course. Okay, the tester and so on. I think my colleague Wang already answered a few of them. And yeah, a few more questions. Okay, I think I will have to answer them later because we're already running out of time. Yeah. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the session. And if you have some time, just check it out. Leave some comments at the marketplace. I will read them or reach out to me or to my colleagues on LinkedIn. So thank you for listening and have a nice day. Bye-bye.